Hi, today I'm going to show you how to assemble these mini moccasins. You should have the pattern here. If you do not, you can head on over to our website, and this is free. And you can print it out. It has a bit of instructions there, and then the pattern, which you can print to size that you'd like. This one's just a small pattern for a little keychain. So if you want to increase that, you just want to print it and make the image a little bit larger. Okay, so to get started on this project, you want to grab any hide that you have, any scrap material will do, as you don't need a really large piece. I'm just going to be using this piece to show you guys, for example, on how to trace it and what pieces to cut out. So you're going to cut out your template, which is your bottom piece, and then your vamp, the other little piece. And you're just going to want to trace that onto your hide, just like that. So that's the bottom piece. And then you're going to grab the other small piece we cut out as well, and that is the vamp. And that's the part we're going to be doing our beading on. So again, trace that out. If you want to make two, then you're going to do that twice. But I'm just doing one for you guys so you can see how we assemble it. So that little piece that goes around the vamp is called the welt. And a good way to measure that one is just cut a strip out. It doesn't have to be super thick, but you want it to be thick enough that you can trim it down once we've sewn it up, which you'll see later. And you want to make sure that it just goes around the curve there, but not the straight part, not that one. So just that curve. So that one looks good, so we'll put that to the side. And then we're going to cut out the little strip for the keychain. And then if you want to make it longer, you can make it longer. If you want to make it shorter, make it shorter. And you can just cut out a piece and see if you like it. So once you've cut out all your pieces, we're going to leave the cuff for the last. So I'll show you guys how to do that at the end. You can see it on the table, but I'll show you guys how to do it properly at the end. So we're going to grab the vamp here. We want to make sure that we're doing our beading on the nice side of the suede or whatever hide you're using. Okay, and then we're going to start our little design on there if you choose. If you don't, then you can skip past. But I'm going to grab my beading needle and my thread. And then we're going to want to cut the end and then just tie a little knot at the end of our beading thread. So once we have it all ready to go, we're going to start beading. So you can kind of eyeball where the middle would be. If you can't, you can just pinch it like that and make a center and then make like a little tick mark if you want. But, you know, these don't have to be too exact because they're just for decoration purposes. So we're just going to bring up our needle through the back. And then we're going to add one bead, which is going to be the center for our flower. So I'm just using a yellow bead. So just one bead. And then we're going to want to place it down. We hold with one hand. And then we're going to put our needle right beside where the bead is. So you can see there. And then bring our needle back through the bottom. And that's it for the center. Pretty easy. Okay. And then when we want to add the flower that goes around, we're just going to go pretty close, maybe like a tiny bit over from our yellow bead, because we're going to be making a circle there with our other bead colors to make the flower. Okay, so you do the same thing. You bring it up the back, and then you want to add what other colors you would like for your flower. So this one I'm going to use blue. So for the flower, I use 7 beads, and that seems to fit quite well. So I have 7 there on my beading needle. Okay. So how I create the circle around the other bead is I hold it with one hand, kind of keep it in place a little bit, and then I take my needle and I go through the first bead that we laid down, so the blue one, and I go all the way through it. So it kind of creates a circle with the thread, and you want to make sure that you're holding it while you do it, because it can raise up a little bit and then make it harder to get through the middle. And then how we want to tack that down is hold it with your left hand and then just go through the leather right where we came up. And that kind of creates that circle here. And how we want to make sure that these beads lay flat is we're just going to tack down every second bead. So we're going to go up through the back, just like we did for the beading. You can kind of see here, we're just going up. We're going to want to go on one side of the bead. So we're going up one side, and then we're going to go, so if we're going up through the right side, we're going to bring our thread on the left side, and that kind of tacks it down so it pulls the beads down so they'll stay put. So I'll do a few more to show you guys. So I'm just going to go up through the back, just like that. So right beside the bead, and then again the opposite side of the same bead. And that creates the tension to keep the beads down. So I'm going to do a few more just to make sure that beadwork is staying flat and it's nice and secure. And if you get a little tangle there, you can just gently try to take that out. Sometimes happens. So I'm just tacking down every second bead. You can tack down every bead if you'd like to, but I just don't feel like it's necessary, especially for this small little design here. So the last one I'm showing you, so again up through the back, and then we're going on the opposite side of the same bead we came up beside. Okay, so there we go. And now you can see it's laying nice and flat. And then you can add little leaf petal or leaves if you want on the side, or any other design. But I'm just going to add 2 little green beads on one side of the flower and then on the opposite side. And we're just doing the same thing. So we're going up through the back, adding 1 bead, and then just going through the front to the back to tack it down. And then once we're finished with our beading, we can trim off the thread and then just tie that in 2 knots. So at the back side, we're just going to tie this in a knot once, and then we're going to repeat it and tie a second knot there. Make sure you don't pull it too tight, or else your vamp will kind of smush and it won't be nice and flat. Okay, so there I did 2 knots. Probably cut it a little bit too short, a little bit harder to tie, but you guys can see. So I have my 2 knots there, and then you can trim that off. And for me, I kind of like just to burn the end, so I know it's not going to unravel just a tiny bit. Okay, so now we're done our vamp. You can see that's where it's going to lay on the moccasin. And then we're going to start with the bottom piece here. And this little square that we drew out, we're going to cut that out. So with the little square that we're cutting out, it is optional. You don't have to include it in the moccasin, but you can if you want. So we'll keep it to the side just so I can show you both ways. So again, we want to make sure that we're going to be using the correct side of the hide. And then I'm going to show you a little trick to make sure everything lines up properly. So we want to fold it in half like this. Make a little tick mark. Make sure we're doing it on the bad side, so we're doing our marking on the bad side of the hide, and we want to do a middle mark, and then we want to do the same here. So we're just going to fold that in half to get our middle mark. Make sure again we're doing it on the bad side, not the side we did our beading. And then we're going to fold that in half, and then we're going to make 2 little tick marks for our reference on where to do our sewing and our crimping, which you'll see in a minute. Okay, so that's going to be our crimping part, and this part is going to be our straight stitch part. Okay, so then you can see, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. You can see how the moccasin has a straight and then it starts to curve. So where that curve starts, that's where we're going to line up our vamp. And then we're going to use those little reference tick marks that we made there to make the same marks on the bottom piece of the moccasin. So you can see it has that little curve, line it up there, and then just do a little tick mark there. And that will give our sewing references for our crimping and our straight lines. Okay, so that's going to be our crimping, and that part is going to be our straight stitch. Now that we have all of our reference marks, we're going to start sewing. So whenever you're sewing, you want the seams to be on the inside unless you do like the outside stitch, but I'm going to show you how you sew from the bad side. So when you flip it out, you're not going to see any sewing marks. So you want to grab your thread again. I'm just going to use a beading needle. If you want to use a glover's needle and sinew, you can. But the kits and how I'm showing you with the beading needle, I feel like is a little bit better because the sinew is quite thick and the glover needle makes the holes bigger. So I feel like it wasn't looking as nice and clean. And this again is just like a decoration or a keychain, so you know, no one's going to be wearing it. So once you have your thread and your needle ready to go, we're going to fold this and start sewing up this back seam here. So I'm just going to start at the top here, and we're just going to go through one side and bring it through the next. And then this little tail here, I'm just going to burn it so it doesn't stick out so much. Okay, then we're just going to continue sewing. I'm doing a blanket stitch. However, you can use a whip stitch if you want, if that's what you're comfortable with. I just feel like this one holds a little bit better. Totally preference, but give it a try if you haven't. Okay, so we're just going to keep stitching all the way down until we get to the end. And then remember, we're stitching this inside out, so when we flip it, the nice side of the hide or material you're using is going to be on the outside. So whenever you're stitching this, you want it to be inside out, so all your seams aren't going to show. Okay, so keep going until you get to the end. Once you get to the end, we're going to do this little section here. And then that little piece that we cut out, if you want to put that in, you can. You might just have to trim it a little bit, and you just stuff it in there, and then you can sew up that all together. However, for this one, I'm just going to take it out so I can show you guys, because I don't feel like it's necessary just for the small one, but totally up to you. So we're just going to continue like we did with the back seam, and we're just going to close up that little heel piece that we cut out. So same thing, I'm just doing a blanket stitch here. You can do a whip stitch. Okay, and then when we're done that, we want to make sure that we sewed up all the pieces there, so it's going to look like kind of an upside down T. And then we're going to cut that and do 2 knots again, and then you can also just burn off a little bit of the excess as well once you cut it, and then you can burn off a little bit of the excess there so it doesn't stick out. Okay, so that is the bottom piece all finished. And then you can see we sewed up on the bad side, so when we flip it, it's going to be the nice side of the suede. Next step we're going to be doing is going to be attaching the vamp to the bottom. So you want to grab your vamp, and you want to make sure you have it the correct side. So we want the good sides facing each other. See? So if you flip it, you can see that's the nice side and that's the nice side. We don't want to have the beading facing upwards, because when we flip it, it's going to be the opposite of what we want. Okay, and then we're going to grab our little welt we cut, and this is where we're going to be adding it. So you see that straight line again, that curve? That's where we're going to start attaching our vamp. So again, if you need to rethread and you need more thread for this one, you might need a longer piece, so rethread your needle. And then we're going to go ahead and start right at that little notch right there. We want to line up our welt. The welt also has a good and bad side, so you can make sure that the good sides are all facing each other. So the good side of the welt should be facing the vamp. Okay, so then we want to have the vamp and the welt together lined up, and then we want to line both of those up to that little notch, so where it dips in. So we're gonna go through the front, and you want to go through all 3 layers. So you're going through the vamp, the welt, and the bottom piece. And I am doing the same stitch here, so I'm just doing the blanket stitch. So you're just doing pretty much a whip stitch, and then you're going through that loop. That kind of keeps everything in place. And we want to do this until we reach the first little mark that we made on the vamp. So that's our reference mark. So this is our reference where we need to start doing our crimping, which I'll show you in a second. So we need to do 1 more stitch here, and then that will be right at our mark we made. Okay, and then we're going to start doing the crimping. And if you've never done crimping, it might take a little practice, but this stitch kind of helps to keep it in place a little bit better. So you want to use your 2 fingers to kind of hold the vamp and the welt, and then use your middle finger to kind of make a little bunch. And then if you do the blanket stitch here, it will hold that little loop for you. Okay, so I'll show you a few more. And we want to make sure our middle lines there, so the vamp middle line and then the bottom piece little middle line match up. So we want those 2 lines to connect, and that's how we keep the moccasin straight, so it's not looking crooked. Okay, so going through all 3 layers, creating a little bunch there with our finger, going through it a second time, and then just taking our needle and going through the loop, and that will keep the little loop that we made there, that little bunch, in place. Okay, so we just continue and make sure you check that your centers are going to match up. You might have to make your bunches a little smaller, a little bigger as you go along. If you see you have more space on the vamp than you do the bottom piece. But we want to make sure that those lines match up, so everything is centered. So I'm keeping an eye on here. I can see my 2 lines are matching, so we're good. And then we're going to continue the same thing all the way around until we get to our next line. So once we're getting close to the second line, we want to make sure those lines match up as well. And then the most important part is where our vamp ends, and make sure that that part matches up with that part. So the same as how we started. So we want to make sure that the vamp and the bottom piece where it dips are matching up. And that will tell us that we have sewn it correctly and that it's balanced on every side. So again, now we're done with our crimping. We can just do a straight stitch, blanket stitch, whip stitch, whatever you prefer. And then we just want to go until the end of our vamp. And then we're going to stop there. We're going to cut it and tie it off. Okay, so now we're done with this part. We can try to flip it right side out. And just be gentle here so you don't rip anything. And then this is when we're going to go ahead and trim our welt. So you can trim it down, cut the excess off, and then you might have to use some small scissors just to clean it up a little bit. So it looks nice and clean. Okay, and then there we have the bottom done and our vamp done. So the next part we're going to do is the keychain piece that we're adding. If you're not adding the keychain piece, whatever you're going to add, if you're just doing this on your own and you don't have a kit, then this is when you would do, you know, if you want to do like mirror hangers, you want to do a Christmas decoration, this is when you would want to add whatever you're adding. But for the kit, we include this strip here and the keychain. So we're going to grab our little strip of leather for the keychain, and then we're going to want to sew it to the back of the moccasin. Okay, so this one we're going to be doing just a simple stitch. So I'm going to show you just to line it up here, and then you're just going to want to go through to the back. So I'm just going to hide my tail a little bit from there, so I'm just going in through one piece of it, but then when I'm going in through the back, I'm going to go through all three. So I'm going through the bottom of the moccasin piece that we completed, and then I'm going through both pieces of the strip for the keychain. Okay, so you want to go back and forth a few times to make sure it's secure. This one's a little harder to get through because we're going through 3 layers. Okay, so you want to go, when you come out through the back, you want to go back through the back to the front. And then you want to do this as many times as you need until you feel like it's secure and it's not going to come loose or fall off. So once we're done attaching that piece, we're going to add this trim part. Okay, so for this part, you want to make sure, if you're cutting it yourself, you want to make sure that it's going to go all the way around the moccasin. If you ordered a kit, then this will come pre-cut in the kit. So I'm just cutting and showing you guys another option. If you want to make a little fringe, instead of having it straight, you can cut a little bit of a fringe to make it different. So just make little cuts in it, and then you can see you can add a little fringe as well. That's kind of cute. But if you want to leave it just straight, I'm going to show you guys how to assemble this with just the straight one. So again, you want to make sure that you're finding the good side of the hide and the bad side. Okay, and then we're going to want to start sewing it at the back, but we do not want to go over top of our strip we made for the keychain. So we want to go right beside it. Okay, so when we're sewing this, you want to have it laying inside of the moccasin, and the side that you're seeing that's showing right now is going to be the bad side, because when we flip it, then you're going to have the good side showing on the outside. So you might have to watch this first, and then maybe just go back and watch it while you're sewing your moccasins up. It will make sense once you see the whole thing. Okay, so we're going to do the same stitch here. We're going to attach this part all the way around the opening of our moccasin. So I'm just going to do a blanket stitch. Same thing, all the way around, and then make sure you stop before you get to the keychain strip that we inserted. Okay, so we're getting close to the back where we started, but we're not going to go over top of our strip we made for the keychain. Okay, we want to grab our keychain strap and we're going to push it forward because the moccasin trim, we want it to go all the way around the back without the keychain strapping in the way. Okay, and I can see I have some excess. So I'm just going to trim that off, and you can see it looks like there might be a little bit too much there, but I'm just going to sew up a little bit because if we trim off too much, you're not going to get that around your moccasin. And with this back seam here that you see there, it looks like there's a little bit too much, so we're going to trim a little bit. However, you don't want it super short that it's not going to flip over nicely, because if you have that back seam that we're going to sew up in a minute, you'll see if you have it too short, like the two seams that are going together, it won't be able to flip around your moccasin. So you want it to have a little bit of give for your seam allowance. Okay, so I'm just going to do one more stitch there to finish up the back, and then we're going to sew up this part. Okay, so this is like the back seam of our trim, and we want to make sure that's lined up properly, and then we're just going to go ahead and stitch that closed. So again, I'm doing the blanket stitch. So once we've finished up sewing our back seam, we're going to tie it in a knot, and then I'm just going to burn the end here. And then we're going to flip that whole trim down, just like that. And then if you want to tack it down, you can. If you don't, you don't have to. I mean, totally up to you, preference. I'm going to show you how to tack this down in a second so it stays put. Okay? So you want to grab your needle again, and we're going to start from going underneath the trim. So we hide the tail of our thread, and then you're just going to want to go kind of underneath. So go through the trim again, and then go underneath it and kind of just grab a little bit of the hide there. If you can see, I'm going at an angle. So just a small piece of the hide, and then bring it through. And then take your needle and go back up again underneath the trim. You can see I'm going underneath the trim there. Bring your needle up. And that kind of hides the thread a little bit. And then you want to go through the trim again, and then a little bit of the bottom piece, and pull it out. And then you just want to repeat this whole step until you get to the back. So once we're getting close to the end, I'm going to show you how to do your last stitch so you can kind of hide the thread so you don't see it sticking out. So we're just going to go up again through the trim and then down. So we're just going to go down through the trim this time. We're not going through the leather, the bottom piece. And then we're just going to want to tie it and hide that end piece. I'm just burning a little bit, but you can hide that end piece just underneath the trim there. And then I'm going to show you if you want to add some liner to it, just so it makes it a little bit more full. You could just add a little bit of a liner, any kind of fluff, cotton, anything you have at home. If you bought a kit, then we'll give you a little piece of liner, and you can just put that in. I hope you enjoyed making these mini moccasins with us today. Be sure to head to our website for all of our patterns, kits, and tutorials.